really comes down to this from a 5-pillar standpoint. It's identifying those core attributes that a business operates around. And that is their operational independence, their financials, it's their systems.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I am your host, Nick Olsen. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. My guest today is the founder of Exit Systems and the creator of Value Atlas Assessment. He helps business owners exit without regret. He has a brand new book coming out in 2026 called Built to Exit. His frameworks are the Peloton of business exits, intense, structured, and you will feel it the next day. His work is based on the belief that business owners do not need more ideas, but fewer bottlenecks. Please welcome my guest today, Charles Dents. Charles, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Nick, and glad to be here.
Awesome. I appreciate you taking the time. I know we connected on LinkedIn. You're a viewer of the show, so thank you for listening in on a regular basis. I appreciate that. And you have some exciting news. You got a brand new book coming out early 2026. Tell our listeners more about that book and what they can expect from it.
Well, as a brand, Exit Systems is really new in the marketplace. Strength behind Exit Systems is based on the knowledge and intelligence and experiences of the members of Exit Systems. However, because it's a new brand in 2025, we want to give a sneak peek into our framework, into how Exit Systems actually delivers value to our customers. And that's what the book is all about.
They can probably get it at all the normal spots when it comes out in early 2026, I would imagine.
That's correct.
And who would be your typical reader? Who should, what type of person should buy the book?
Well, it's actually multiple. First, it would be founders of companies that have been in operation for years, right? But it could be someone who's a new entrepreneur because it helps them create a really great foundation. But then, if we flip it, it could be intermediaries like PE firms, M&A advisors, wealth management advisors, investment bankers. I mean, it gives great insight for all of those because it shows how we create value for the company currently so that they make more money today and so that they can have a premium exit in the future. Because every business will exit in some form or fashion eventually.
So it sounds like all of our listeners should go and buy your books. So it'll be for everybody that listens to this show.
Well, that would be great. Yes.
But yeah, be on the lookout early 2026 for Charles' book. But Exit Systems, you said it's a brand, it's a newer brand launched in 2025. What is Exit Systems all about? Tell our listeners about your company and why you started it.
Well, what it's about is focus on transformation versus just the transaction. So most exit advisors, if you will, there's a huge focus on the transaction itself. But really, the value comes in the transformation. So if that company can be completely transformed so that it becomes a high value asset, then it's a totally different game when it comes to the seller and buyer interaction.
And, we're talking about exits, we're talking about the transformation. If they don't go through that transformation and they want to exit, what are some common mistakes that you see these owners make? And I would imagine you guys can help your clients avoid those mistakes. What are some common ones you see?
Yeah. So a common mistake is owner believing that they can wake up tomorrow and sell their business for the value that they believe it's worth. It just doesn't happen. It may happen in some very rare occasions because there's some IP that they may have or data they may have that, someone would like to purchase, but by and large, it just doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen because there isn't preparation. When an owner or founder, when they're running their business, they're really focused on running their business. They're not focused on identifying those things that buyers value. And so that becomes a mistake. It really takes years to fully prepare if you haven't done so at the beginning.
So a way to, prevent that from happening is work with, someone like yourself, your team at Exit Systems to identify those early on. And like you said, transform the business into something that is sellable whenever that might be. You guys use an AI powered assessment, to prevent those bottlenecks, maybe at the valuation, part of it. Tell us about that assessment that you use and how you're leveraging AI and how it can help the business owner understand, where they're at right now.
Yeah, so that AI assessment evolved over time. So we've been using it really for a couple of years now, even before AI became popular. And the way we started using it, it wasn't under the Exit Systems banner or brand. It was with my company called Excellent. And that's where we developed the framework itself. And that framework has decades of knowledge built into it because it's not just knowledge from my part, but from experts across the industry. We basically have used knowledge of those who have done thousands of exits, those who have built businesses, those who have sold businesses, those who have advised on, what it takes to have a premium sell, et cetera. And it's loaded into our AI tool and allows us to do the initial assessment to help that company understand where they are today, what their challenges are, because sometimes they may not really fully recognize what those challenges are, and what they can do in the short term and the long term to increase their valuation, ultimately increase their EBITDA, and position them for those things that buyers really care about.
Do you have an example maybe of a company that went, through this assessment and had a successful outcome, maybe getting the value they wanted, or maybe better preparing themselves for the
this one sounds simple, but it is so impactful. So, and this is common, but it's impactful. Dependency is the number one issue we run into, where there's tremendous amount of dependency on the founder, the owner, that tribal knowledge that's built into companies. So we had a company when we went in, the owner believed that their company was worth X number of dollars. So, however, when they had a valuation done, when the valuation was done, it came in much less. So what eventually occurred is that when they hired us, we went in, we did our assessment. We actually identified the owner dependence. We identified the lack of systemization. And those two things in and of themselves became the targets of the improvement. We also worked on their culture as well because they had a disconnected culture to their brand. But we worked on those first two things because of this. The owner dependence, all of their critical decisions were going through the owner. And those critical decisions then became a bottleneck because everyone's waiting on the owner to make a decision. Once they came to grips, so that's a longer story because they did not come to grips with the fact that they were a bottleneck. So we had to go through some additional work with them. I actually brought in some neuroscientists who helped with the mindset. And once they were able to unlock their mindset of what was happening, then it also helped from the standpoint of releasing the tribal knowledge. And they had tribal knowledge because of the dependence on the owner, but they also had key members of their team that had tribal knowledge that was undocumented. So what we did with that is that we documented, created SOPs, those SOPs. Then we took the SOPs and we determined what could be automated, and not to eliminate those individuals with the knowledge, but to augment their ability to deliver, and then to deliver quicker on the services and products that they were offering, and free up their time so that they could focus on the things that were really the most important, the things that they were really hired to do, versus a lot of the manual work that they were doing. And so ultimately, what that ended up is that they ended up with, over what they initially thought, they ended up with a 3 times improvement in their valuation.
Nice. And all just to get that knowledge in their heads of the owner and the key management team into a system where other people can implement and use it. They go away in an exit, then that knowledge is still there, right? That's the idea.
That's right. So what happens from a buyer perspective is that it becomes transferable.
Right.
It's not transferable if it's in someone's head. So once it becomes a system and it's no longer tribal knowledge, then it becomes a transferable system. And that's what buyers really purchase. They purchase systems. They're really not buying a business. Yeah, they're buying a business, but what they're buying something that's transferable, something that's not dependent upon any one individual.
You brought in a neuroscientist. That's the first time I've heard that. What was the thought process and idea around someone of that skill set to come in and help out with this particular case?
Well, that's one of the key things that we do at Exit Systems. We certainly are focused on the transformation, but that means 2 things. That means we focus on the transformation of the company itself. So everything that's involved, systems, et cetera, financials, all of that good stuff there that we all know about. But it also means a transformation for the founders, the owners, transformation of their mindset. And you probably have seen this yourself, where, they're own this. This is my baby. I built it. It is my identity without them ever saying it. It becomes their identity. And we bring in utilize neuroscientists because we need to detach them from that thought process. And the reason is this: we're really big on the relationship part, and from a relationship standpoint, for us, we haven't done our job unless we help actually prepare that founder, that owner, for their next. What is their next? So we've seen it many times where a business has been sold, and that owner and founder, they really don't have a life afterwards. And the quality of life really goes down because now they wake up and they don't go to that business that they've been part of, that they spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day at. It's no longer there. So we help them understand what type of exit they want and help them create a life of what they want to do afterwards, but start that creation while they're still in the business, so that becomes an easier transition.
Can only golf so much.
Well, a funny thing, as a quick story, there was a client who they wanted to literally go hiking in the mountains. They wanted to do it basically every day, right? It got old real quick. And once it got old, they did not know what they were going to do with their life. And their life quality, the quality of their life, their physical, emotional, everything declined so quickly. It was really a scary sight, and also a very disappointing one, because they had options to prepare before that, but some are stubborn. So they have to experience it before they really realize, okay, I need to do something different.
Yeah, and that's something that that is their identity, like you said before. Typically that's they've built this business up from scratch. It's their identity, it's who they are. And when you lose that, you don't have a plan. Yeah, I could imagine there's more stories like that than you know of, which, like you said, is sad for sure.
Yeah, it does become sad.
Now you guys have something called the 5 pillars every owner should know. Tell our listeners about what the idea of the 5 pillars are and what actually those 5 pillars are.
Well, it really comes down to this from a 5 pillar standpoint. It's identifying those core attributes that a business operates around. And that is their operational independence, it's their financials, it's their systems, their team strength, which includes their leadership and culture, as well as then how they are strategically positioned from to be able to run their business on a daily basis and strategically positioned from an exit perspective. Operations, financials, systems, team strength, and strategic positioning.
This episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. Are there any that are more important than the others? Or are they all equally weighted, or is there some that owners don't do as well on as others?
It depends on the company, right? So we tailor for each engagement. It's all tailored. But I will say, as I mentioned earlier, I think two immediately stand out. Actually, yeah, I would say two of those immediately stand out. They all stand out for me, but two specifically. And number one is the owner dependence. And the owner dependence means that operationally, there's not operational dependence. So they both tie together. So that's the operational side. And then the other is also tightly woven into that, and that's a lack of systems. So when there's a lack of systems, and what we see is that companies grow, and all these companies are typically successful, right? So they grow, they're successful, but what they haven't done is that they haven't innovated. They haven't put into place, they haven't replaced the systems, the processes, the procedures that got them to where they are. And so now they've created this bottleneck, this plateau that prevents them from scaling. And scaling is something that every buyer would like to see. They want to see a company that can scale without chaos. And so if their systems are not sound, there will be chaos. If there's operational dependence upon key members, there will be chaos. So unlocking those two really are the things that helps a business get on the right track. And we see that almost in every case.
I would imagine not having systems in place with high dependence on the owner kind of correlate and play, work against each other a little bit.
Oh, they do. They're in absolute conflict.
So I would imagine you start with the systems, or maybe the systems, you incorporate the systems that'll lessen the dependence on the owner. Like you said early on, you get those systems on paper and process, and then the owner is not it's not all in the owner's head, right?
It's not in their head. The reason we start with the owner in most cases is because now once they realize their dependence, they realize their bottlenecks, they realize the things that are preventing them from growing and scaling to the point they want to, they realize that the things that are causing their valuation not to be what they would like it to be. Once they realize that, then it becomes easier to prioritize everything else, because now they see the value of everything else that we are advising them on.
Got to get out of their own way, right?
Exactly. That's the truth.
You mentioned culture before, leadership. How do those two things, when those things are aligned, obviously that's a good thing, but how do you prevent those two things from not being in alignment to avoid, losing value in the company? Because obviously culture is a big thing, and that does it in most cases stem from or begin with the leadership?
It certainly begins with leadership, because culture typically is not a focus. Culture itself is really not a focus. There may be other things that are focused that are related to culture, but specifically culture where we have a team member that his company brings into the Exit Systems brand and culture as a focus. And so they have a proprietary tool that we utilize that helps identify those cultural breakdowns. And what that means is that ultimately, you hear the term everyone rowing in the same direction, right? Well, just because you're going in the same direction doesn't mean you're on the same page, right? And so what it identifies is how to help those companies row in the right direction. So everyone's not only going in the same direction, but they're all focused on the right thing, which is ultimately the brand of that company. And once we are able to dive into the root causes of what's causing those disconnects, now they can relate to the brand, but also the leadership team. The leadership team has to have the strength in place in order to guide that cultural redirect, right? And not only that, but the leadership team becomes important in that whole exercise in terms of the succession planning within the company. And so those leaders are the ones that should be running the business. Those executive leaders should be running the business and not the founder, not the owner, the executive team. So all of that comes into play in aligning and having a healthy culture.
What would you advise your owners, your clients, the owners of the firms on including leadership in this process? There's a lot of worry about people leaving if they know I'm going to sell, confidentiality, all those sorts of things. What is your stance on including leadership, and when do you recommend that the owner includes them in this discussion?
Well, first of all, when we go into a company, it's really the initial focus. I know Exit Systems is in our company name and brand, but our initial focus is really transformation. And so it's about scaling the growth. That's how we come in, because until we get everyone aligned and culturally healthy, then there is an issue with identifying or exposing too early that this company is up for sale. Because you can lose the employees, et cetera. But once the culture is healthy, then the conversation becomes a different type of conversation, because now one of our key components is that we help the employees see themselves as owners of the company. They have a stake in the health of the company. They have a stake in helping the company make money. They have a stake in ensuring that company is valuable, not just today, but into the future. So once they have an understanding of that, the reality is that there is a time limit that we all have on our humanity. And at some point, the company will transition. And I want to be able to be in a position that when it transitions, that I go with that transition and I still remain a valuable asset, if you want to call people asset. I'm still a valuable asset to the company. But you have to have a healthy mindset in order to do that. And that's the whole cultural shift. So timing is everything when it comes to alerting the leadership team and the rest of the employees of the shift that will eventually take place. Therefore, the importance of starting early with the whole exit planning. And when we are helping our companies scale their growth, even if that is the only focus, we are always blending in and layering in the exit strategy. So when it's time to have that discussion, we're well ahead of the game.
What are some common cultural pitfalls that you see that affect a business and that maybe you have to do the most work on to fix, when you identify that as an issue?
It really comes down to particularly departments. So we're focused on the lower mid-market, right? And so there are departments, and where the departments are not aligned and not focused on the same thing. So the top line goals of the company are not necessarily the goals of each department. Each department has a different focus. So therefore, they're certainly going in the right direction. So it goes back to going in the right direction, for that particular goal for that department, but it's not the same direction as the company focus. And so what are the priorities? And therefore, that's where the leadership team comes into play, that they understand what that focus is, the goals are, and they're able then to communicate that and lead their teams in the same.
Makes sense.
So that's one example.
Yeah. Love it. Because I mean, culture is something that, like, I think you mentioned, hit on briefly before, was it's not always out in front focused on as a thing that can inhibit a business from selling. But, I would imagine when a buyer goes through due diligence and that's not addressed, that they can see, that culture is, not great and might be, obviously it's going to be a big issue and might be a deterrent from that buyer wanting to purchase the company.
Yeah, there's no doubt, that you said something very critical. Buyers see everything. The sophisticated buyer, they see everything, and they see it because they want to use it to discount your company.
Yeah, I mean, and those are probably, instead of looking at the ways that you can look at synergies and looking at ways that you could discount it, that's an interesting point of view, because they will ask for discounts if, those certain things are not where they need to be or should be.
That's correct. And, our job is to ensure we have 18 levers within our platform that we focus on within that transformational platform that are very critical because they're all things that buyers care about. And so therefore, when we focus on those things and we improve each of those and they begin to compound upon one another, then buyers have less of things to focus on for discount. And culture is one of those. It's not thought of typically, well, it depends on who's involved, but typically it's not thought of as something that's a value lever. But sophisticated buyers see it as either a value lever or something that they can discount because they don't want a company, or they don't want to have to do the work to improve the culture after, so post deal. They want, if they have a culture that doesn't require that effort, then that also increases the value of the company.
Right. They want to plug and play. They want to hit the ground running with the integration between the two businesses and not have to work on, fixing a culture of the company.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
What are, for our listeners, what are some, advice you would give advisors on, whether they do the work or they identify and work with someone like yourself, but just building exit readiness without sacrificing growth, because you can spend so much time on being ready for the exit, but you still got a business to run. So what advice would you give business owners or advisors, advising business owners on what are those key things to make sure that they're still growing, but you are getting exit ready?
Yeah. It really goes back to something I said earlier. It's really the focus on transformation and the right focus on transformation, because there are a lot of things that can be focused on to improve growth, to improve scaling, but they really may not relate to an exit, right? But they do relate to running your business more efficiently and focusing on, like, for example, focusing on the right metrics. For example, you can focus on metrics that, or founders and owners can focus on metrics that buyers care about. But the benefit of that is that they also help run the business better, more efficiently. And so really the focus should be on growth scaling versus just exit. Now, certainly someone, if they say they're ready to exit, they may no longer have the energy to put in place the things that will improve their business to get that premium value. They may decide that, I will take what I get. So particularly as we have more founders and owners who are aging out because, they're baby boomers, maybe Gen X, and, they're multi-generational companies and they're just tired. And then they don't have family to transition to because the kids don't want the business, right? It's You hear this term, a boring business. A boring business is valuable, it makes money, but it's not it's not the innovative, TikTokish type of business, right? And that's a real thing. And it's becoming more and more relevant. So the focus on the growth, the scaling of the growth scaling is really the primary thing we believe should be the focus. Then once the right focus is there, then the exit preparation takes care of itself because it's built in.
You've already done the work. You don't have to
For example.
backtrack. You don't have to be like, oh no, I wish, yeah. So do the work. I mean, like you said, you're building a transformation. You're putting your business in a position to grow. A growing business is a good business to sell. So you might as well continue to do that, do it early on. And then when that exit is ready, you should be prepared, putting in, things that you had mentioned here today. And, so you don't have to go back and wait another 2 years to do the work. You've already done the work from the get-go.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Charles, this conversation has been amazing. I really appreciate you joining. Where can our listeners find out about Exit Systems, about your book, all the great work you're doing, if they want to connect with you and learn more about you guys?
Certainly you can start with our website, exitsystemsai.com. So exitsystemsai.com, or you can email me directly at charles@exitsystemsai.com. And certainly we'll get back with you, but you can start with the website, and there's, a ton of information there. You can schedule meetings from there as well. So everything can happen through that portal.
Make sure to go out, keep your eye open for Charles's book in early 2026 called Built to Exit. Get your hands on that. It'll be a ton of great information. And I imagine they can find out more information on your website about the book from there as more comes out. And so like, share, comment on this episode, pass it on to anybody you think might benefit from our conversation here today. A lot of great information was shared. Charles, really thank you for joining. Until next time, everybody, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.